Welcome to Prepared for Parenthood, the podcast for hopeful, expectant, and new parents with little ones up to age 5. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Duger, a psychotherapist, author, educator, parent coach, and married mother of 2. On this show, we'll discuss everything from the most up-to-date practicals of best supporting your young children, to thriving in relationship as a family, to more surprising topics around the psychology and development of babies from conception through age 5. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. I'm thrilled to have you here today. Welcome back to Prepared for Parenthood. Our guest today is Rebecca Olson, an international life coach and host of the Ambitious and Balanced Working Moms podcast. She helps career-focused parents stop feeling overwhelmed and not enough so they can be present with their kids while crushing their career goals. Welcome, Rebecca. So happy to have you here today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and having this conversation.
There are a lot of parents who are watching or listening to this who are working parents, and that experience of that phrase work-life balance can also feel pretty elusive. Could you share a little bit about your own journey in defining work-life balance and how you decided to make helping other moms find their work-life balance your actual career?
I love that question. When I became a mom, now my kids are 10 and 7, so I was pregnant with my first 11 years ago at this point. I had what I like to call a motherhood identity crisis. I just did not know, who am I? What do I want? What do I want to do with the rest of my life? Just big kind of esoteric questions that I found really surprised me. And I found it was actually one of the things that was spiraling me out of balance in a lot of ways. Because I find so much of this experience that we want to have when we start thinking about work-life balance, if you even think about the way we use that word balance, we say, I want to feel balanced, right? We talk about it like it's a feeling, though we oftentimes think about it in terms of how we manage our priorities. It's actually this internal experience that we really want. We want calm, we want peace, we want to feel grounded, we want to feel confident, right? All these things that sort of comes along with feeling this sense of balance. And for me, feeling really lost in terms of what I really wanted and not feeling connected to my career anymore and not knowing if I was headed in the right direction, like that was really the beginning of what I would say was this phase of feeling really out of balance for me. I couldn't even get to the point to start thinking about how I wanted to manage my external priorities until I started figuring out how I wanted to manage my internal priorities. Ultimately, my own little crisis here led me to find coaching to help women in this particular moment or season, what I see as a very crucial moment in their life, and help them to have really strategic conversations around what they want to do with their career, how they want to balance life, and all of those things, and talk about both the internal and external, because it really is both, right? In order to experience work-life balance, there has to be a sense of internal clarity around what's important to you and why you're doing what you're doing. Life has to feel purposeful to you if you're going to experience work-life balance. Doesn't matter if you manage your time really well. If internally you're thinking to yourself, I don't even know if I should be doing this or if I even want to do this. So it's really a combination of both internal skill sets and conversations and external tools to actually learn how to prioritize well.
And what were you doing prior to being a coach? What was your previous career?
I was in event management. I was hosting 20,000, 30,000 person events at an organization in San Francisco, but I also contracted for tech companies, and they would hire me to come in and hold these huge events for them, managing all the logistics and things like that. And I was really good at it. I was the breadwinner of the family. I enjoyed it for a long period of time. I just couldn't see myself going down that trajectory. It wasn't the thing that brought me life. And if I was going to be away from my kids, I wanted whatever I was going to be spending my time doing to feel worth it. I wanted to wake up every day and feel like what I was doing meant something to me. And that eventually led down to this path of figuring out coaching was the direction I wanted to go.
I had this experience after having my first baby. She was still a baby, and I went to a wedding reception carrying her. And a 25-year-old young man walked over and was just trying to have a conversation. And I had stopped working at that point. And I remember him saying, "So what do you do?" And I had that
what you were speaking to, that internal crisis for the first time. I was like, what do I do? I'm a mom. I, at that point, had been a therapist, but had stopped working at that particular agency. Yeah. And I remember freezing like a deer in the headlights. Like, yeah, what do I do? And how do I explain it to people? How do I answer this question? Yeah. And I looked at him and I said, well, I'm a mom. And he's like, oh, great. And he turned and walked away. And it was the beginning of this whole conversation with myself of how do I even navigate that question? What does it mean for me? So I think even if you are someone who's going to end up going back to a position that you've held in the past after a maternity leave, it is a really big question. It is motherhood and parenthood changes your identity so profoundly. I feel that it is a great time to reevaluate, like, what am I doing? Do I want to be doing this? Absolutely. So along that same line, a lot of parents are self-employed like myself. And so I can manage work-life balance probably a little more easily than someone who has more traditional work experience of 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. But for those expectant moms who are working for someone else currently, what are some conversations that they might want to have with company management as they prepare for their parental leave? I love that we've been already having this conversation about what's sort of going on inside of us, because I think women intend to not talk about this. It just, for whatever reason, isn't the thing that we tend to talk about. These big internal questions that take place. Like, we all understand that life is going to change. Like, we have that sense of that, right? Literally, our time is going to change. What we spend our time doing is going to change. How much we sleep is going to change. Our rhythms are going to change. All these things, everybody as a culture can understand. It's that we don't understand the change that's going on inside of us at the same time. We could prepare on some level for that, and we need to hear stories of women and how they've navigated that. Men too, for that matter, and how they've navigated becoming a parent as well. And then it happens. And then that's when everything from hormones to this whole identity shift that's taking place becomes really confusing for a lot of women in particular. And so you have to understand that this is going to happen. It happens to everyone, where you're going to have to figure out how to manage your time differently and prioritize differently and experience rhythms of life differently. But you're also going to have to manage a whole lot of internal conversations differently. And giving space for that is going to be really important. I remember coming back to my corporate job, essentially my event management job, and I was told that there had been a bet going on if I was even going to return. And I look back at that now, and it's like, how judgmental of them, one, right? It also shows there's a bias out there. There's a lot of cultural beliefs around what women do at this season of life, but they're also not wrong. 1 in 3 women within 18 months of having their first kid leave their job. They don't necessarily leave the workforce. There's a percentage of those people that do leave the workforce, but a lot of them leave to start their own business or start their own company or become a consultant, or they go part-time, or they just change to a different company that they perceive as being more family friendly. But it's understanding that this change actually sparks all sorts of both internal conversations and then external conversations that come with that. So as you're starting to prepare for a parental leave, starting to have these conversations ahead of time when your mind is so much clearer than it's going to be after you start having kids. And when your mind can really foresee the bigger picture of what you've been building in your career, you can have a lot more strategic conversations at that moment to say, where do you want to go in this company is a big one to start having with your managers, whoever you report to, before you're taking maternity leave. As I said, there's all these biases that are sort of subliminal or maybe pretty obvious, like that one. Oh, she wasn't even going to return. But another one that tends to come up at this time is there's an assumption that women don't want to take on opportunities at work because they're so overloaded with being a mom at this point. And so they're coming from a really wonderful, genuine, loving place. A lot of managers overlook women that have had kids recently because they don't want to burden them with a potential job opportunity or shift in their job. When in reality, most of those women would say that they would have gladly taken it. You know, they've worked their career for those types of opportunities that tend to also happen at the same time that we have kids. And so starting to really voice ahead of time what kinds of opportunities you're looking for, where you want your career to go in the next year to 2 years, the longevity that you see at your company. These are really, really key conversations to start having about your career ahead of time. But the other one I would really point to is making sure you're having really clear conversations around how you want the parental leave transition to go, just generally speaking, particularly around communication. Some women that I work with, they don't even want to think about work. They don't want to be a part of it. Like, I don't want to re-engage until X date. But then there's a lot of women that don't want that. They've worked really hard at their career. There's a lot of exciting things going on. And so there is a level of communication that they want, but they want it to be on their terms. So having some really clear conversations around, here's the kinds of things I want to hear about that's going on in the company. Message me when good news is happening, or somebody's joining our team, or some shift has happened, or tell us when we've landed a big client. I want to celebrate those things with you. Starting to think through what are the types of conversations that you might want to have, because it's not like a light switch that turns off when you have kids. You still have been engaged in this work for a long time, so you might want to be a part of those conversations. So thinking about that ahead of time and starting to communicate that are really key pieces as well, to make sure that you get what you want out of the transition and you stay involved with your career if that's what you want.
And then how about for the new moms who they've gone through all this preparation, they think they know what they want, and they get into motherhood and they have this experience of, oh, I think I want to spend more time with my family than I set myself up for at work. And maybe I don't want to take that promotion that I said I wanted to take. How would you guide them in terms of finding their way through that experience?
Yeah, because then we circle right back again to that internal conversation that has to happen, right? You're navigating the question of, am I on the path that I really want to be on? Do I want to keep going down this trajectory that I have been on? And again, I think we don't voice that conversation that women have in our head enough. Most women that I talk with go through some form of that. And I was a mom that had absolutely no desire to be a stay-at-home mom. None whatsoever. And then I had my kid, and I could not imagine leaving my tiny human to go do my job at all. And I bawled and I bawled and I bawled as I returned to work. And I ended up asking for a reduced schedule, just like 5 hours a week, because I commuted an hour, 15 minutes each way.
So, Rebecca, what are some of the internal curveballs that some new parents may experience, do you think?
So we've talked a little bit about this already, but if we were to start to dig a little bit further into what some of these look like, the motherhood identity crisis, those questions tend to be like, who am I? What do I want? Clarifying, am I going in the direction I want to go in life? Am I headed towards the bigger kind of goals that I want? Again, I think a really big piece of work-life balance is feeling like life has purpose and has meaning, and like what you're doing today fits into the bigger picture of what you want. Another internal curveball that tends to happen is this kind of questioning of yourself and your value. We might even categorize that as being imposter syndrome that tends to come up. Because I see this in a lot of my clients. When you have your kid, you just don't know what to expect when you come back to work. And in a lot of levels, the only thing we can expect is what has been in the past, right? So it's almost like the way you visualize things going and getting back into work and back into the rhythms of work was exactly the same way it looked before you had a child. And of course, in reality, it can't look like that at all, because your energy is different, your emotions are different, your rhythms are different, your time is literally different, everything is different. And so you come back from leave and getting back into work is not going to look exactly the same way anymore, right? In fact, I actually think that there's a new skill set that has to be developed at this time. And the skill set is about learning how to balance two very important priorities at the same time. One priority being your now tiny human that is a part of your life and your family, and the other one being your career. And how do you manage both of those goals simultaneously? You're not going to be able to do it in the same way that you were doing it before. But of course, you're going to come back to work and you're going to try. You're going to try to be as productive as you were before and operate in the same way and manage your hours in the same way, manage your energy in the same way. And in reality, you got to learn a whole new skill set. And so what comes along with that process, I find, is that a lot of people just go, holy smokes, can I hack this? Am I up for this? Maybe I can't do this. Am I really as good as I thought I was? Then the imposter syndrome comes up and a lack of confidence comes up. And all these seeds of doubt start to spring up because you haven't yet learned that skill set of managing life.
And in your experience, approximately how long is the average for a working mom to build that new skill set?
Oh gosh, that's such a great question. I don't know if I've ever really thought of that before quantitatively in that way. I think that there's the period of coming directly back from a leave. You've got multiple months of just trying to grapple with sleep deprivation, trying to be productive, even if you aren't on a reduced work schedule or whatnot, or even if you are, it doesn't really matter. There's this confusion of what the heck am I doing and trying to get back on track. The sleep deprivation is a really big thing, though, and I don't want to overlook that because scientifically that's been studied how important sleep is to our mental health, to our productivity, to our efficiency, to our decision making, all of those things. And obviously, we are as sleep deprived as we will ever be when we first start having kids. And then for a lot of us, we have a second kid, usually within a couple of years after that. And so we go through the whole cycle again. Sleep deprivation can happen for years for some people. But I would really say that for the women I work with, if I were to work with them right after they get back from parental leave and we were to work together for 6 months, that's a good amount of time that we are really able to get through the messy internal conversations that need to happen, 2 feet on the ground, really remember who I am, the value I bring, really talk objectively about what your priorities are, how to tackle multiple competing priorities at the same time. How do you let things go and say no more? All of that, I think, could be tackled in about 3 to 6 months if you have a really good direct process that you are working that through. If you're muddling your way through it, that could probably be a lot longer.
And then how about women who have chosen to continue nursing their child and they go back to work? That can be a pretty time-consuming experience of
Super time.
pumping milk. In your experience, how do you feel like they fare going through that process? That's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. And I know I pumped until my daughter was almost a year old. And so I did it for 9 months essentially in my workplace. And it was an emotional experience, right? Like there's so much hormones that come along with the breastfeeding experience and the pumping experience, just in the production of milk. That is, again, one of those internal, we just think we're going crazy because we're so emotional or we have all these things going on inside of us. No, really, there's hormones going on. No, really, your body is doing something it's supposed to do, pumping hormones through your body. It's all okay. I wish somebody had told me that because I felt like a mess as I cried so often in those first 9 months back and through the pumping process. That was really challenging as well. But there's a lot of laws these days around this. Like you have to have a place that's sanitary to pump, that is private, right? You have to have a place to be able to store your milk. There's all these laws now that are in place, but there's going to be the challenge of having to step away from what the rest of your colleagues potentially are doing if you're excusing yourself from meetings or having to deny meetings because you have to be in the rhythm of pumping. And to be honest, for most of us, none of that feels good. I mean, even though we want to provide breast milk for our children and we think it's the best thing for them, it's the thing we've chosen, we know it's the right decision. That doesn't usually mean it comes with rainbows and smiles and it feels great all the time, right? It's a time suck and it's a sacrifice that you're making. And it feels really uncomfortable to be like, hey, team, I got to step away for 30 minutes to go take care of this. It's a very confusing time. Recognize that it's going to be a little bit messy, that you need to be prepared in a physical sense, but you also need to be prepared in an emotional sense and really make some decisions about how you want to use that time. I know there's a lot of women that will work through that time. I was not one of those women. I just decided that I was going to look through photos of my kid. I brought a book to read during that time to just try to relax because my milk consumption was down. Those are good, loving, compassionate things to do for yourself as well. And whichever side of the coin you're on, it's all okay, right? It's all a normal experience for you to feel whatever you're feeling during that time.
We've been speaking today with Rebecca Olson. She's a international life coach who works with working moms. Rebecca, can you share any last bits of wisdom with our audience and then also how to get in touch with you and find out more about your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So the last thing I would really say is I hope you heard me seed this throughout this entire conversation. It's all normal. The internal crisis, the questioning, the emotions, the hormones, the sleep deprivation, the feeling like you can't hack it, the self-doubt, everything that comes along with this transition of motherhood is confusing and normal, right? You're not alone. You've got millions of moms that have gone before you navigating this season of life and this transition. And I think that through any transition, what requires an extra level of support, whatever that means for you. That support could mean surrounding yourself with friends, family, people that are physically supporting you in a way. But I remember I was a part of a Facebook group. We called it the 2 a.m. feeding group because we would all be on Facebook at 2 a.m. while we were breastfeeding our kids in the middle of the night. And we would ask each other questions. Then I had another friend that was breastfeeding at the same time. And we would message each other at 1 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning just to have some extra support. It's really important. Everybody probably can tap into those kinds of resources. And then, of course, there's resources like hiring coaches or tapping into resources that your employer might have that can support you during the season and this transition. Go full in and say, I'm going to get all the support I can during that time. I would recommend it to anyone. And then in terms of getting a hold of me, there's two things I'd love to offer to you. My podcast is really a great way to get extra support. I talk about all things related to the intersection of being a mom and working. My podcast name is Ambitious and Balanced Working Moms. So you can find that anywhere that you listen to podcasts. And then if you want to learn very specifically about my coaching, you can go to my website, RebeccaOlsonCoaching.com.
Thanks so much for being here with us today, Rebecca. Great to have you on.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to the Prepared for Parenthood podcast today. I hope you found this episode educational, informational, and conversational, and that you'll join me again for another episode soon. If you enjoyed listening to today's podcast, I'd very much appreciate if you would rate, review, and subscribe. If you're interested in more information related to today's podcast or are looking for parent coaching or courses, you can find my information in the show notes or online at preparedforparenthood.com.